action.
Hi, this is Rhonda and Brian back talking to you again about portfolio management. So we had spoken in previous videos about portfolio management and the first part of our approach. In this video, we'd like to talk about the second part of our approach, which is to focus on effectiveness rather than efficiencies, which is focusing on outcomes rather than outputs. So if we want to go to the next slide. So what we're finding as we speak to organizations is that there is a huge investment a lot of people, a lot of organizations are still making on their agile transformations. They're putting in a lot of resources, they're putting in a lot of money to try and get the results that they desire. And even though they're working hard, they're doing their exercises, they're doing their sit-ups, they're still not getting the results they really desire. And so we have to ask why. Why is that happening? It's because they have been focusing on becoming efficient instead of focusing on being effective. Let's look at the quote at the bottom of the slide. Organizations that simply focus on outputs, output metrics and outputs, are not seeing the big picture, which is to ensure they are delivering value or outcomes to their customers and their business. And so what this is saying is that if we are having all this activity to focus on outputs and delivering outputs better, we're working really hard with those teams to make their Scrum practices better. Those are outputs, and it's not addressing the problem of efficiency. So Brian, we have been working with some clients recently, some organizations where we went into the organization and did an assessment of where they were in their practices. And we consciously made the decision that instead of focusing first on the teams and coaching the teams to do better in their practices, we actually chose to put in place first portfolio management practices, a way for them to develop and implement on their strategy. Because if they don't stop and first think about what is it that they want to achieve, what are the outcomes that they desire, no matter how efficient they are with their teams, if they don't have the outcomes clearly defined and clearly articulated, all the efficiency in the world may not make them successful. What do you think, Brian?
I think you're absolutely correct. In fact, what we end up doing is when we focus on the management committee, we formed the EMS, we formed the portfolio management review sessions. What we found is that they were siloed and fragmented in the way they were allocating their money and their dollars. And because they were so siloed, they were actually selecting less profitable projects just because they had the budget for it. And when we actually had them get together and really work as a collective whole, what they found is that instead of actually allocating different budgets to different departments, when they started actually looking at, well, what's the highest benefit for the company? What they found is that by working collectively, they actually traded budgets and they really focused on what the highest things were and cut the budget for things that were less important. And only through working collectively could you even see this, could you even see that the possibilities existed. So certainly, again, focusing on the outcomes, which are goals that are strategic for the company, they actually direct you away from doing things that are less important.
Right. And so, so we took the approach of first, let's understand what we want to achieve, what we want to build, and then you can focus on how to build it efficiently. So it has to be done in that order to be as effective as possible. So first, let's focus on the outcomes, then we can work on improving our efficiency.
This becomes a difficult thing for a lot of companies to do. And the reason we have this picture up here, we were focusing on workouts, is because when you think about losing weight and getting healthier, the first thing that pops into people's minds is that they should exercise more. But if you talk to any physician, which my wife happens to be one, they will tell you that your diet, what you're actually eating, is far more of a determinant of your health than exercise will ever be. And so, in the same way, when we're doing agile transformations, we have to get away from the conventional wisdom that everyone's using to focus on, again, the exercise part, which I equate to focusing on the ceremonies and events that occur in Scrum, and focusing at the bottom levels to a more kind of a radical approach, but more logical, focusing on outcomes, focusing on putting the practices and procedures in place such that people can see the outcomes. We work it down so they understand what outcomes they're responsible for. So that way they can actually be agile and adjust their outputs and adjust their activities to achieve those outcomes. Way more effective.
Yep.
And so
now if you're in a Scrum at Scale environment, Scrum at Scale sets up the organization so well in order to really be able to focus on that efficiency. So we've got the two cycles here shown on the slide. And if you look at the right cycle, which is that product owner cycle, Scrum at Scale allows that and really enables that focus on effectiveness in that product owner cycle. So that product owner is looking at the vision, looking at the outcomes that are desired, and doing that decomposition and a refinement to break down those outcomes into the right set of things in order to achieve that.
It's super important that we recognize that the meta scrums are events that actually occur where those groups of people in the meta scrum are actually taking the vision from the top. They're prioritizing those items, they're decomposing them, and they're making sure that only the items that relate to the highest priorities, the things that are most beneficial to the business that will generate these outcomes, make it into the backlogs. And as long as you're actually making sure that this alignment takes place, and when I say the alignment, I should be able to see, if I look into a team's backlog and ask the question, why does it exist? I should see something that is in a scale backlog. And if I ask, well, why does that thing exist? I should see something that is either in a higher scale backlog or in the strategy for the organization itself. So we should be able to perform these type of tasks to make sure there's complete alignment. And when that happens, you can start eliminating things that don't line up. If I ask how or why does this thing exist, and it doesn't line up to something that's in a higher scale backlog, then I know that's something I should cut out. And I can get rid of that dark work, which again, dark work is usually the work that does not relate to strategy. 30% of the work in most companies, if I eliminate that dark work, and now all of a sudden the people that are working on it can be put towards more useful endeavors, toward things that really matter, it's like hiring another 60% of your workforce again, because you freed them up 30% up and you put them on something more beneficial. So now you're actually completing things 60% faster. This makes a huge difference. This is how you get the results fast in your companies.
Right. And let's take a look at one more slide, Brian. And so what you've just described is that focus on the outcomes by the product owner or chief product owner or chief product owner, depending on your organization, is it's all that focus on outcomes is through the whole entire structure of the organization, from strategy all the way down to team. You focus on the outcomes at that level, at that layer, and then what activities do you need to see happen in order to achieve that outcome? That's what your product owner or chief product owner is going to determine for you, and it's through the whole entire top to bottom layer of the work.
And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that this not only does alignment exist, when you create your alignment, you create the traceability such that anything you're working on, it isn't tied to a higher work type item. It ties to the outcome, right? As you can see, each of the work pieces here, they line up to a higher level outcome. And as long as you have that type of alignment where you're tying it to a higher outcome, then what you'll find is that the organization will be much more focused. They'll know what they're actually working on, and people will be able to adjust, as you should in Agile, to actually meet what the customers want.
Right. And like you mentioned earlier, Brian, when we've used this approach with clients, it's typical we can see a 30% cut in the work that's being executed because it's not aligning to the outcomes that are really wanted. And so we've seen huge savings in just eliminating a bunch of extra work because it's not tied to the outcomes. When you look at it from an outcome perspective, huge savings, huge increase in looking at getting closer to achieving what the business wants from their agile transformation, and really being satisfied with what they're gaining in terms of outcomes versus outputs.
And the beautiful thing
So
is we've been able to accomplish those 30% productivity gains in a matter of months, in a few months.
that's right. It's actually pretty fast to do, as we've seen. So I hope everybody's taken away some good learnings in terms of the focus on outcomes through the whole entire work structure, why it's so important, and consider, is outcome something that needs to be focused on in your organization? Is there too much focus on efficiency and not enough focus on effectiveness?
All right, with that, we will sign off and we will catch you for our next video next week.